I saw this tweet from Field of 68 yesterday, and it is, who is their current Mount Rushmore, active head coaches in 2024? Who is their Mount Rushmore? They put out Bill Self of Kansas, Kelvin Sampson of Houston, Dan Hurley of UConn, and Baylor Scott Drew. Those are your 4 current. And I saw this, and my initial thought was, yeah, sure. Okay, that makes sense. And I thought about it a little bit. And I'm thinking, man, there's some great names left off that list. And I'm trying to kind of go with their criteria for it. So I decided to make my own criteria. And what I want to look at in terms of the best active head coaches in 2024, not 2012, not 1996, 2024. I would love to see, first, I would need to see a Hall of Fame resume, really, if you're going to be in the top 4, a Hall of Fame resume, consistency, winning in March, and consistency winning in March, right? Those are the things. If you could develop NBA talent, that's terrific too. But in terms of this Mount Rushmore, I don't really care about that. I don't. So, that might help or hurt some people. So first, I'm looking at who did not make the list. Mark Few. Couple Final Fours under his belt. Gonzaga's made the Sweet 16, whatever it is now. 6 straight years, is that it? 7? Something crazy. 9. They make the Sweet 16 every year, which us as Baylor fans can really appreciate how tough that is to do. But of course, Mark Few's fingers are like mine. They're ringless. Doesn't have a national championship. I think he's been to 4 Final Fours, but doesn't have that national championship. Okay, so you leave him off the list. I think that's a tough draw because he fits the consistency category better than maybe any coach in college basketball right now, consistently winning in March, but has not gotten that elusive national championship ring, which I think will come for him before he retires, unless he's pulling a Jay Wright and he's going to hang him up next year. I think that is coming for him. And then the next 3 that I thought about on here are 3 Hall of Famers that don't make the list. Okay? Tom Izzo was the first one I thought of. He's been at it forever. He's got a national championship ring, and he has gone to 8 Final Fours. His teams always play he's the prototypical, like, cliche, get the tough schedule early, make people doubt you, and then go and win in March. He's been terrific at that for a long time. And he's one of those who, if I did do NBA products, he's not at the top of the list, but he keeps guys there for years. He has had some terrific All-American players, and through that, he's had some Final Four teams that have not had terrific All-American players. How about Rick Pitino? He's someone people forget about because he's coaching at St. John's now, but I mean, he has coached at some of the top programs in America and won at the very highest level. He's got 2 national titles, 1, depending on what record books you look at, but 2 national titles that he went out there and won, and 7 Final Fours. And he has done that with 2 different teams, which is, again, something that is very rare in college basketball. It's rare to have a career like Tom Izzo where you're doing it only with 1 team, and Pitino's done it with 2 in 2 distinctly different eras. He has taken Kentucky to a couple Final Fours, won a national championship with them in 96, and then took Louisville to back-to-back Final Fours in 2012 and 13, the latter of which he won the national championship. Again, depending on what record book you look at. And almost had another notch on his belt. He took Iona to the NCAA tournament and very nearly maybe should have had St. John's in the NCAA tournament right now. But one thing that I do need to take into account on this is sanctions and cheating, potentially. Tom Izzo doesn't really have that on his resume. Rick Pitino does. He's had to vacate a national championship and 2 Final Fours at Louisville, and right now is, like, as we speak, being investigated once again. for tampering and talking to players who weren't yet in the transfer portal in his time at St. John's. So that is something you need to take into account when it comes to these guys. When you look at the four that the field of 68 had, two of those guys have had major investigations. Kelvin Sampson, when he was at OU, forced him out of OU. That is something that we look at now, and it's like, well, every coach does that now. It's encouraged with the way he was talking to players and trying to get transfers and things like that. The other, of course, is Bill Self, which, look, there are a lot of skeletons in that closet. He's certainly, he's had assistants and partners go to jail. There is a lot of smoke around that fire that around Bill Self. Whether we ever feel the full effect of that fire, don't know, but there's plenty of smoke around there. Third one that didn't make the list that I want to mention, because the cheating thing definitely comes into account here, John Calipari. He doesn't hit the consistency measure right now. The last almost 10 years, really. It's been 10 years since he's made a Final Four, right? 9 years since he's made a Final Four. So you don't have that consistency aspect right now, but he has something that most college coaches ever don't have. He has taken not one team to a Final Four, not two teams to a Final Four, but three different teams to a Final Four, three very different programs. And he has taken these programs from the relative ashes, the ashes at UMass are a lot different from the ashes at Kentucky, and taken them to Final Four, national title game, and in one case, a national championship. I don't think we can undersell this or understate this enough. Let me try that again. I don't think we can overstate this enough. John Calipari, as a 36-year-old, took UMass to the Final Four. The University of Massachusetts, the UMass Minutemen, to the Final Four, where he lost to Rick Pitino in Kentucky, by the way. That is arguably a greater accomplishment than anyone I've listed outside of Scott Drew winning a national championship. To take UMass to the Final Four, that one gets vacated. Took Memphis to the national championship game, resurrected that program. Derrick Rose, Chris Douglas Roberts. That one's vacated. Kentucky was in a mess when Calipari came. And 3-4 years into that thing, he had them winning a national championship, which has not yet been vacated. That, to me, is one of the most impressive resumes in college basketball history. And I know he's memed now and people don't like him. A lot of fan bases don't like him, of course. And he's been a first weekend exit guy the last 5 or 6 years. But outside of that one consistency criterion that I have there, he's got to be on that Mount Rushmore. And if we're talking about consistency, Dan Hurley is in his second straight Final Four. So I think I would have Calipari over Dan Hurley on that Mount Rushmore still. But that would probably change by next Tuesday when Dan Hurley and UConn win another national championship. Then it becomes tough to argue. All three of these guys are in the Hall of Fame. By the way, Rick Pitino in the Italian American Sports Hall of Fame, worth mentioning. But the other two, Izzo and Calipari, are not. I think Calipari deserves a spot on that list, on that current Mount Rushmore. And it's tough for me to have a guy like Kelvin Sampson, who has not won a national championship, to justify that, but not having Mark Few, a guy who has also not won a national championship. Because I think you're splitting hairs at who is the better coach. And in terms of consistency, Mark Few has had a more consistent run over 10 or 15 years, but the last 5 or 6, those two programs have been neck and neck, Gonzaga and Houston. And honestly, if you look at the consistency in the winning in March, Scott Drew might be lucky to be on there. What he's done, the most impressive thing of all those 7 or 8 coaches that I listed, he has the most impressive of building Baylor up from where it was into winning a national championship. But the consistency in winning in March has not been there. It's been one Elite 8 in 10 years now. And, you talk about the one Final Four, and that's a fantastic team, but I'm seeing Pitino did it 7 times. Izzo did it 8 times. Calipari did it 6 times. And I know a lot of those programs are different than what Baylor's had to deal with. I know that. But even looking at someone like Calipari, UMass, that's no cakewalk to take to the Final Four. And Memphis at the time was no cakewalk to get to the Final Four. And he had them at 33-1 in the national championship game. So I think Scott Drew does deserve a spot on this Mount Rushmore, but it's closer than you might think. And I don't know if I can have Kelvin Sampson or Dan Hurley on there just yet, even though they're guys I respect the crap out of. When you look at the resumes of these other Hall of Famers that are still coaching in our game right now.